Wow, guys, after the first part of this series, I was absolutely blown away by the genuinely insightful reception from the vast majority of you. I kind of held off a little when thinking about picking this list, particularly down to its subject matter, experimental cinema. You see, the thing is, the genre itself is incredibly difficult to access, and as is the case with the reception of many of these films, it's hard to gauge exactly where the most populous opinion lies. It's hard to put such an open-ended art form into a box and say, yeah, this is the fourth best experimental film I've seen, because all of them are so individually specific. It's like trying to judge smoke. But hey, nobody said it was easy, right? And Coldplay aside, let's see what we can do. Hello horror fans, what's going on? And once again, welcome back to the Scariest channel on YouTube, top 5 scary videos. As per usual, I'll be your horror host, Jack Finch, as today we curiously take a look at the top 5 scariest experimental horror movies, part 2. Roll the clip. For the curious amongst you, that clip was from 2018's Possum, an absolutely fantastic British horror film that errs on the edge of experimental cinema in places, but for this list, it's a little bit tame compared to some of the others. That's not to say that this film isn't utterly bleak and depressing though, because it really is, and if you're on the lookout for a horror movie that will make you feel bleak and hollow, watch Possum, because, yeah, it's not nice. We better get on with the show. Kicking off at number 5, The Neon Demon, 2016. Okay, I said that it wouldn't be easy, and it's not going to be. So let's kick off with this little divisive enigma of cinema, which isn't really a horror movie, but kind of is, and isn't really an experimental movie either, but also kind of is. Yeah, if we're talking about the vacuous space that lies between the cinematic world of forms, this movie would be silently gliding around like some Kubrick monolith of the Instagram generation, absent-mindedly indifferent about any manner of platonic love. 2016's The Neon Demon is a bleak movie. It's almost Lynchian in its presentation. It's cold, calculated, absent of any kind of outward emotion, but in direct contrast to that, this film has a strange love throughout it, although I'm not entirely sure if love is the word. It grapples with the difficult conversation, the world of modelling, and the victims and successors that emerge from it, and because of that, this film has a lot to say, and the truth is, not a lot of people like to face up to that fact. Directed by Nicholas Winding Refn, the brilliant mind that delivered his 2011's Drive and 2013's Only God Forgives, as well as the man responsible for the awesome Pusher trilogy starring Mads Mikkelsen, The Neon Demon tells the tale of a 16-year-old girl, Jessie, played by the remarkable Elle Fanning, an aspiring model who moves to Los Angeles following the death of her parents. There she meets an alluring photographer named Dean, as well as a host of other models, Ruby, Gigi and Sarah, who are seasoned in the ways of narcissism and getting exactly what they want. Listen, if you're watching this film for an A to B narrative, don't. It will frustrate you, because midway through the movie, its seemingly captivating story detaches itself from the tracks and ascends to a completely different level. But in its bizarre, surreal series of ever-increasing grotesque violence, this film has something to say. Again, you might not like what it has to say, but it says it with a grin and a mouthful of blood. If you enjoyed Under the Skin, which featured in part 1 of the series, I think you will also enjoy this one. Swinging in at number 4, Beyond the Black Rainbow, 2011.
You're doing so good.
Okay. Now we're turning up the heat a little, and we really are, because this film, yeah, pass me the blowtorch. Where do we even begin? I had the pleasure or experience, I guess, of watching a midnight viewing of this movie, and I think that's the best way to experience it and try and understand exactly what Panos Cosmatos was trying to convey in his 110 minutes of mind-bending psychotropic spelunking. This film is cavernous in its presentation, and it's very easy to get lost, but watching it late in the evening after an entire day of your mind being active and then getting lambasted with this stuff, yeah, I think that was the point. And surprisingly enough, there's actually an enjoyable, coherent narrative in Beyond the Black Rainbow that harbours a pretty compelling message, actually, if you can follow along with it, that is. And many of the narrative points are only presented as visual illusion, so don't expect to be led by the hand. Written and directed by Panos Cosmatos in his debut feature film, an incredibly exciting director who would later go on to direct 2018's Mandy, starring Nick Cage, which is probably a more palatable version of this film, and you should go and give it a watch. Beyond the Black Rainbow tells the tale of a man named Dr. Barry Nile, played by Michael Rogers. Nile, an incredibly charming scientist, is actually a psychopath and is leading a fringe scientific institution with the sole intention of bridging the gap between science and spirituality, whatever the cost may be. That cost, as it turns out, is at the expense of a young woman named Eleanor, a young girl that Nile keeps captured in the bowels beneath the institution that also happens to be an incredibly potent psychic. Yeah, this film is essentially Stranger Things without the same small town charm and fellowship, and instead a boatload of psychotropic drugs, contact lenses, weird wigs and strange black pools of goo. This film is heavy on everything. It's paranoid and it lays itself into you like some spiritual tendrils from another plane of existence. In other words, it's pretty damn good. Next up at number 3, Annihilation, 2018.
What is it?
Exactly. What is it? Now, some of you may be shocked to see 2018's Annihilation appear on this list, and perhaps even question whether it meets the parameters that we've set out so far. But in contrast to that, I think it's important that we shouldn't disregard a piece of cinema just because it already has the fully fleshed out bones of a narrative. And truth be told, I've been looking for quite a while for a list to fit this film into, so yeah. There you go. You see, a film doesn't have to be senseless or too sensory to be experimental. Sometimes the very content itself can serve that purpose. However, that's not to say that 2018's Annihilation doesn't feature some absolutely batshit visual set pieces, because it does. And albino alligators and skull-ridden talking bears aside, yeah, this film is experimental. I mean that in both theme and in Alex Garland's creative vision, because you just need to take one look at the second half of this film to understand the mind-melding insanity of the whole thing. Written and directed by Alex Garland, based upon the 2014 novel of the same name by Jeff Vandermeer that formed part of his Southern Reach trilogy, Annihilation paints the picture of a zone known as Area X, a southern portion of the United States that, after a mysterious meteor landed in a national wildlife refuge in Florida, has developed into a strange, anomalous zone where nature appears to be taking back control of any form of civilization. It tells a tale of a US Army soldier, Lena, played by the awesome Natalie Portman, who goes on an expedition into the zone following the unsuccessful journey of her husband a year prior. You see, I'll say no more, because if you haven't seen Annihilation, you certainly should, but when we talk about experimental forms, it's in the presentation of this film's narrative where it truly shines. This film doesn't lead you by the hand anywhere. It's a puzzle that needs to be solved by the audience themselves. It relies on its own ambiguity to deliver its message, and that's rare. You can work out your own answers to this dreamlike miasma of a movie instead of having it shoved down your throat. And that's important. Coming in at number 2, Possession, 1981. Okay, here we go, because the next 2 entries on this list are some of the most challenging horror movies ever made. The first, 1981's Possession, is no exception to greatness. Just take that clip for example, where Isabella Adjani delivers such an exhausting performance both physically and mentally that the very essence of the acting method behind it is experimental, given the fact that very few actors and filmmakers would ever subject themselves to such an ordeal. And experimental cinema aside, this is certainly the most genuinely terrifying horror movie on this list, and if you're looking for a pure presentation of fear, then look no further. Written and directed by the legendary Andrzej Zawalski, Possession is a psychological horror movie that stars the remarkable Isabella Adjani alongside Sam Neill as both Anna and Mark, the couple that live in West Berlin during the Cold War era, where Mark serves as a spy for the Allies. However, after returning home from a mysterious mission that is never fully tied up, Mark is shocked to find out that his wife wants a divorce. Although she won't tell him exactly why, she insists that she's found someone else and is ready to move on, and she quickly descends into a series of bizarre excuses and lies as her mind appears to splinter and fragment, and gradually the reason behind her change of character becomes frighteningly clear. I'll say no more about the plot because, again, for an experimental film, there is a lot of narrative to be consumed here, and the actual bones of this story are equal parts simplistic and equal parts horrifying. Genuinely, this film is a nightmare unlike many others. It's incoherent in many places, but all of the moments that stick out like a sore thumb only serve to propel us further into the same fever of madness. Really, Zawalski's expertise is in maintaining this film, holding it together like a car hurtling off a cliff into the abyss just long enough for us to realise exactly what is happening. Isabella Adjani's performance in this film is the stuff of cinematic legend. If anything, watch it just for that. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, Stalker, 1979.
Они нас не догонят.
Да что вы? Они ее боятся, как огня.
Кого?
Talking of nightmares, here's one for you, and this entry has to take our number one spot, although it is close in contest with 1981's Possession, so consider them both worthy of the utmost of experimental merit. Now, I'm not entirely sure if you could ever call this film a horror film, because in many ways it certainly is not, but the content, the themes, and the very essence of what this film embodies is the literal definition of horror, and also many other things, the majority of which I'm not entirely sure if I'll ever be qualified to comment on. Stalker is an experience, and whether you're a fan of experimental cinema or not, if you're a fan of horror and the philosophy behind it, it's a must-see. I like to think of Stalker as a prologue to Harlan Ellison's 1967 sci-fi classic, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. If you read that particular story, which if you haven't, you should, then you may have an idea as to the themes crammed into this piece of cinema. Written and directed by the legend of cinema, that is Andrei Tarkovsky, the enigmatic and celebrated Russian director responsible for the likes of 1972's Solaris and 1975's Mirror, amongst many others, Stalker is a film like no other. And I really mean that. Some have come close, notably David Lynch in some respects, particularly in some of the imagery conjured throughout this film, but Stalker stands alone as a complete and utter enigma of filmmaking. It tells a tale of an expedition of three men led by a figure known as the Stalker, who takes his two clients, one of them a writer seeking inspiration and another a professor seeking scientific discovery, to a mysterious and restricted area known as the Zone. In the Zone, supposedly, there exists a room which is alleged to grant a person their innermost desires, whatever the price of that may be. And then they set off, just like that, roaming through the wasteland of some form or other of a forgotten civilization. Honestly, there's not a lot I can say about Stalker, or even try and condense it into some form of a point. Give it a watch. See for yourself. Well, there we have it, horror fans. Our list of the top 5 scariest experimental horror movies. Part 2. What do you guys think? Do you agree? Disagree? Have any more to add to this list? Then let us know your thoughts down in the comment section below, as well as any choice picks of your own. Before we depart from today's video though, let's first take a quick look at some of your more creative comments from over the past few days. First up, Cameron Shepherd says, Jack, are you a Leeds United fan? If so, you've gone up in my estimations a billionfold. Hashtag all Leeds are we. Hashtag marching on together. Yes, Cameron Shepherd, I am indeed, from birth, Leeds United, a club like no other. In Marcelo Bielsa, we trust, marching on together, seeing the Premier League, Cameron. And then, believe it or not, Alan Farr says, Super Leeds, marching on together. What? I didn't know there were so many Leeds fans on top 5 scary videos. This is brilliant. And then, Anthony Lee says, Leeds, Leeds, Leeds. Wow. Still top of the league, I guess. But unfortunately, on that note, that's all we've got time for in today's video. Cheers for sticking around all the way until the end. If you were a fan of this video, or just top 5 scary videos in general, then please be a dear and hit that thumbs up button, as well as that subscribe button. I'll be seeing you in the next one. As per usual, I've been your horror host, Jack Finch. You've been watching top 5 scary videos. And until next time, you take it easy.